Help us hit our first 1,000 subscribers. Your support drives us to create even more wonderful stories. Thanks for being part of our journey. It started on a rainy Thursday morning. Hannah came home with a soaked folder and mascara running down her cheeks. But her eyes were shining. "I got it," she whispered. I blinked. "Got what?" "My dream job," she said, breathless at Crane and Blake, the law firm downtown. I stood up from the couch. My coffee went cold in my hand. Crane and Blake? That was one of the top firms in the city. Competitive, ruthless, elite. Hannah had always talked about it like some unreachable dream. "I didn't even know you applied," I said, trying to smile. I wanted it to be a surprise. She grinned. I didn't want to jinx it. She spun in the middle of the living room like a child. I clapped, kissed her, held her tight, but something in me twitched. Not because I wasn't proud, but because she'd stopped talking about work altogether the last few months. That night, we celebrated with takeout and wine. She told me about her interview, the questions they asked, how she nailed the negotiation. It sounded real. It sounded rehearsed, but I didn't press. I didn't want to be that husband, the suspicious one, the paranoid one, so I let it go. For now. The next morning, she woke up earlier than usual, did her hair, put on lipstick, wore heels I hadn't seen in over a year. I kissed her cheek and said, "You'll kill it." She winked and said, "I already did," then walked out the door. As it closed behind her, I just stood there. Something wasn't sitting right, but I couldn't explain it. So I poured another cup of coffee, sat in silence, and whispered to myself, "Just trust her." But I couldn't shake it, and I didn't know it yet. But that morning would be the beginning of the end. For the first 2 weeks, Hannah's routine changed completely. She left the house at 7:10 sharp every morning. Hair curled, nails, always fresh perfume I hadn't smelled in years. She never forgot her work badge, though I never once saw her actually wear it. She came home late, often after 8:00 p.m., tired, but not exhausted, always energized, buzzing, almost like something inside her was more alive than it used to be. I chalked it up to passion, new beginnings, but some nights, I caught her humming while doing dishes. A melody I'd never heard before. When I asked what she was humming, she'd shrug. "Oh, probably just something I heard at work." Then she'd change the subject. She talked about coworkers I'd never met, meetings I couldn't verify, and the way she described the office. It sounded off, too perfect, like reading a Yelp review she memorized. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Until one Friday, she called me at noon, saying she was slammed with work and wouldn't be home until late. I decided to surprise her. I'd never visited her at the new firm, so I grabbed her favorite sandwich, drove across town, and headed to Crane and Blake. The lobby was quiet and marble clean. I walked up to the front desk. "Hi," I said. "I'm here to see my wife, Hannah Miller. She works here." The receptionist tilted her head, brows pulled together. "One moment," she said, typing. Then she looked back at me. "I'm sorry, sir. We don't have anyone by that name in our employee directory." My heart didn't stop. It slowed, like it was bracing. "Maybe she's new?" I said, "Just started 2 weeks ago." She checked again, shook her head. "No, Hannah Miller, not as a staff member, not as a contractor." I forced a smile. "Must be a different department then." "Sorry to bother you." She smiled politely, but I could feel her watching me as I left. I sat in my car for 10 full minutes, gripping the steering wheel, cold sweat on my back. My fingers tingled, because now I wasn't just suspicious. I was certain Hannah had lied, not just once, not in passing. She built a whole identity around a job she didn't even have. And now I needed to know, if she wasn't going to work every day, where the hell was she going? That night, I didn't ask her anything. I smiled when she walked through the door. I asked how work was. She said, "Stressful, but exciting. Then kissed me like nothing was wrong, like she wasn't lying to my face. I nodded through dinner, pretended to care about the case she was working on. She even mentioned a coworker named Alyssa. Again, I checked later. There was no Alyssa on the staff page of Crane and Blake's website. In fact, nothing she told me for 2 weeks could be verified. It was all fiction, but fiction always leaves holes, and I was going to find one. The next morning, I told her my car was acting up. I asked if I could borrow hers for a quick errand. She hesitated, just for a second. Before handing over the keys, it was that hesitation that told me everything I needed to know. I didn't drive far, just to a parking lot nearby, and in the glove compartment, I placed a GPS tracker. Small, silent, undetectable. I synced it to my phone and drove back like nothing happened. When I returned the keys, I thanked her with a kiss. She smiled, but I swear, for half a second, her eyes were scanning my face, looking for something she couldn't name. The next day, I watched her location in real time. At 7:12 a.m., she left the house. At 8:03, she stopped. Not at the law firm, not even in the business district. She parked outside a residential building on the west side of town. Not run down, not luxury, just ordinary. She stayed there for exactly 3 hours and 28 minutes, then drove across town to a coffee shop, then sat there for an hour, then came home exhausted from her long day in court. I didn't confront her. I tracked her again the next day. Same building, same time. Third day, same routine. Always that apartment. Always alone. Always lying. I stared at my phone as her dot blinked on the same street for the 4th morning in a row. And I knew what I had to do. The question wasn't if she was hiding something. The question now was, what was behind that door? On the 5th morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. Not guesses. Not suspicions. Answers. I waited until she left. Gave her a 10-minute head start. Then followed her. Same route. Same building. Same lie. She parked on the side of the building just like before. I stayed 3 cars behind, watching through my tinted windshield. She got out.
No briefcase. No laptop.
Just a small bag. And a smile. That damn smile I hadn't seen since our honeymoon. She pressed a code on the front door keypad. Walked in without hesitation, like she belonged there. I waited 15 minutes, then stepped out of my car and crossed the street. My hands weren't shaking. My thoughts weren't racing. I was quiet, calm in the most terrifying way. I rang the buzzer once. No answer. I rang again. Still nothing. I almost turned around. Then the door opened, but it wasn't Hannah. It was a man, mid-30s, shirtless, tattoo on his collarbone, confused eyes. Yeah, he asked, leaning against the doorframe. I swallowed. I didn't plan this part. Is Hannah here? His face changed, like he recognized the name but didn't know why it was coming from me. Yeah, he said slowly. She's in the shower. Every part of me went cold. I nodded once, didn't say a word, just turned and walked away. He called after me, "Wait, who are you?" But I didn't stop, because if he had to ask that, it meant she never told him. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. In that moment, everything clicked. The job, the schedule, the second phone I once saw her put on silent, the new clothes, the smell of cologne that wasn't mine. She wasn't just hiding something, she was living 2 lives. And I had just knocked on the front door of the second one. When I walked back through our front door that night, I didn't say a word. Hannah was in the kitchen, pouring wine. She smiled at me like nothing was burning, like our life wasn't on fire. "How was your day?" she asked sweetly. I forced a smile. "Quiet." She handed me a glass. "To new beginnings," she said, raising hers. I raised mine too, but in my head, I was already writing the end. That night, I lay beside her in bed, wide awake. Her breathing was slow even. She looked peaceful, but next to her, my mind was slicing through every moment from the past 2 months. Every lie she told, every detail she crafted. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theater, and I'd been sitting front row. The next morning, I left early, told her I had meetings. In reality, I met with a friend of mine, Chris, a private investigator who owed me a favor. I told him everything, showed him the location, the man who answered the door, the tracker logs, the lie about the job. Chris listened, then said, "You want evidence?" I nodded. Photos, texts. "I want the whole story she's been living. Just not with me." He smirked. "Give me 3 days." Back home, I acted normal. I told Hannah we should take a weekend trip soon. Just the two of us. She lit up. "I'd love that," she said. "I feel like we've both been distant lately." "You made it distant." I wanted to scream, but I just nodded. "You're right. Let's fix that." She kissed me, and I held her like it wasn't fake. That night, I logged into our shared cloud account, backed up everything. Messages, emails, our call logs, even her health tracker. There was a 6-day gap in entries. Coincidentally, the week after she started at the new firm. I didn't say anything. I just saved it all into a folder titled Reality Check. 3 days passed. Chris delivered photos of her entering that same apartment. The man, his name was Evan, wrapping his arms around her in the hallway, them kissing, her leaving in different clothes.
Nobody вкase no laptop.
Just guilt and perfume. I printed everything, put it in a brown envelope, and slid it under my side of the bed, because the next move was hers, and I was going to give her a chance to confess. It was a Sunday morning, too calm. She made pancakes, hummed in the kitchen like nothing was bleeding behind her back. I watched her move, carefully, calculated. I realized something as I stirred my coffee. She wasn't just lying to protect herself. She was lying because she thought I'd never find out. When we sat down at the table, I cleared my throat. "I've been thinking," I said. She smiled across from me. "Oh, about your job?" I continued. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What about it?" I kept my voice steady. "You've never invited me to visit." She laughed nervously. "It's just not that kind of office, super strict, right?" I said. "And yet you never bring work home." "I like keeping things separate," she said quickly. Too quickly. I leaned back. "Do you like it?" She blinked. "The job?" "Yeah." "Do you enjoy it?" She nodded. "It's everything I wanted." That was it. The final lie. I reached under the table and placed the brown envelope between us. She looked at it like it was a bomb. "What's that?" She whispered. "Reality," I said. She didn't move, so I opened it for her, pulled out the photos, the GPS logs, the messages Chris had gathered, and the picture of Evan kissing her in the hallway. I didn't raise my voice, didn't throw the table, just slid the photo across to her. She stared at it for a long time, then back at me. Her eyes were wide, mouth trembling, still trying to decide if she should lie again. She started, but I held up my hand.
No. No speeches. No excuses. No fake tears.
Just the truth. You lied. For weeks, maybe months. You looked me in the eyes every day and chose to feed me fiction. And now the show's over. She dropped her fork. It clanged against the plate. Then she whispered the first honest words she'd spoken in weeks. "How long have you known?" I leaned in, looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Since the day you forgot to change your shoes after visiting him." She gasped, because she remembered that day, those heels. Evan had complimented them. She told me she bought them for court, but she never wore them again. Until that morning, silence stretched across the table like fog. And in that silence, I stood up and said just one thing: "Get out." She didn't leave right away. After I told her to get out, She just sat there, staring at the envelope like it might explode. Her hands shook, her lips moved, but no sound came. Finally, she whispered, "Daniel, please." I didn't look at her. "Daniel, just let me explain." "I told you no more lies," I said, and I walked into the bedroom, left her at that table with nothing but her guilt and cold pancakes. That night, she slept on the couch. I didn't ask her to. She just knew. And in the morning, she was gone. A note on the fridge. "Please talk to me. I love you." I threw it out with the coffee grounds. 3 days passed. I didn't call, didn't text. She tried both. Voicemails, long and broken. One just said, "I made a mistake. I miss you." But it was too late for regret. She didn't miss me. She missed control. That Friday, I did something she never expected. I texted her, "Dinner? Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Manjas. One chance." She replied instantly, "I'll be there. Thank you. I'll explain everything." She thought it was reconciliation, but I had other plans. I also sent a message to Evan, found him on Facebook. "Hey, I'm Hannah's husband. She's been lying to both of us if you want the truth. Meet me at Manjas tomorrow at 7. Don't bring her, don't warn her, trust me." He left me on read. Then, 30 minutes later, replied, "I'll be there." Saturday came. I wore a clean shirt, shaved. Not for her, for myself. I got to the restaurant early and asked for a table for 3. Corner booth, private, low light, perfect. Hannah showed up in a red dress I hadn't seen since our anniversary. She smiled like a woman about to reclaim her husband. She sat down, grabbed my hand across the table. "I've missed you," she said softly. "I'm glad you're here," I replied. She leaned in, eyes glossy. "I just want to say." Then Evan walked in, and her world shattered. She looked at him, then back at me, then him again. She didn't even breathe. Evan stood next to the table. "I think I missed something," he said, voice tight. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Evan, He held up his hand. "Don't." He turned to me. "You knew the whole time." I nodded, then stood up, placed my napkin on the table, and said to both of them, "Now you two can finish this dinner." I already lost my appetite, and just like that, I walked out, leaving behind a woman who lied to 2 men, and 2 men who finally knew the truth. The morning after the dinner, she came to the house. She was wearing that same red dress. Only now it looked like a costume. Her makeup was smudged, hair pulled back like she didn't know what else to do. She didn't knock. She just stood outside the front door and stared through the glass, like a ghost, like she didn't recognize the man on the other side anymore. Maybe because I wasn't the same anymore. I opened the door slowly. She didn't say a word. She stepped inside. I didn't stop her, but I didn't invite her either. She stood in the hallway like she was expecting a trap, like she finally understood this wasn't her house anymore. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Her voice cracked, and for a second, I almost believed her. But then I remembered every day she looked me in the eye and said, "Have a good day at work." Every day she came home with fake stories. Every time she kissed me while texting another man behind my back. I nodded, but said nothing. "I messed up," she continued. "I was scared. I felt lost. We weren't connecting anymore. I didn't think you loved me the same way." There it was. The blame shift. Classic. "It wasn't about him," she added. "I just needed to feel wanted again." I finally spoke. "So you made up an entire job?" She swallowed hard. I panicked. "No," I said, "you planned." There's a difference. A lie born in panic lasts a day. A life of lies takes weeks of rehearsals. She tried to step closer. I stepped back. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "I just want a chance to fix this." "You had hundreds of chances," I replied. "You killed them all one lie at a time." She sat down on the couch. The same couch we picked out together 3 years ago. The same one she probably sat on after seeing him. Is there someone else? She asked quietly. I turned to her, flat and firm.
No.
I'm not like you. She flinched. That hurt more than yelling ever could. I walked toward the door, opened it, waited. She stood up slowly, looked around the house like she knew it was the last time, then looked at me and asked, "Do you still love me?" I paused, then said, "I don't even know who you are," and shut the door behind her. The first week without her felt heavy, not painful, just quiet in a way I wasn't used to. No humming in the kitchen, no perfume in the hallway.
No fake kisses.
Only silence. Honest, simple silence. And for the first time in months, it didn't feel lonely. I cleaned the house, threw out the wine glasses she liked, took down the framed photo of our anniversary in Rome, boxed it all up, not with hate, with peace. It wasn't my life anymore. It was just something I lived through. At work, people said I seemed different, lighter, focused. I guess when you stop carrying a lie, your spine straightens without you realizing. One afternoon, I walked into a bookstore. It wasn't planned, just one of those moments when your feet take you somewhere your mind didn't expect. And there she was, not Hannah, someone new. She was standing in the poetry section, reading something by Ocean Vuong. She looked up and smiled without fear. Her name was Leah, and she had the kind of voice you want to fall asleep to. We talked about books, cities, and why good people let bad things happen for too long. She didn't ask if I was married, and I didn't bring it up, because in that moment, I wasn't someone's ex. I was just me, and that was enough. We went for coffee, talked about little things, not trauma, not scars, just now, and that felt like a miracle. Later that night, I got one last text from Hannah. I still love you if you ever want to talk. I'm here. I stared at it for a while, then deleted it without replying. Not because I was angry, but because I was finally free. The storm was over, and I wasn't chasing closure anymore. I was living it. It was a Thursday morning. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window. Same house, same furniture, but everything inside felt new. Because I wasn't waking up in a lie anymore. I wasn't checking the GPS tracker or pretending not to notice the lipstick on her shirt. I was just breathing. I poured a cup of coffee and sat by the window. No phone in my hand. No thoughts chasing themselves in circles. Just me, alive, and for once enough. A knock came at the door around noon. It was the courier. Final divorce papers. I signed without hesitation.
No tears. No pause.
Just a signature that felt like a beginning, not an ending. Later that day, I met Leah again. Same cafe, same table near the back. She smiled when she saw me, like she'd been hoping I'd show. She didn't ask about my past, didn't dig. She let me be quiet when I needed, and laughed when I made some stupid joke about how I used to think love was forever. Her laugh felt more healing than any apology Hannah ever gave. That night, I walked Leah home.
No promises.
No pressure. Just two people walking through a quiet city under warm streetlights. She stopped at her building, looked at me, and asked, "Are you okay?" I nodded, then said, "I am now," and I meant it. When I got home, there was one final message on my phone. From Hannah. "You really meant it, Marie not coming back." No reply, no need, because no part of me lived there anymore. I sat on the balcony and watched the stars, and I whispered something I'd never said before. "Thank you for breaking me, you gave me back my life." And with that, I stood up, closed the door, and walked into a future I finally chose for myself. The end.